George Kelly Barnes is better known by his pseudonym Machine Gun Kelly. He was an American gangster born in Memphis, Tennessee in 1900. Machine Gun Kelly was active as a criminal during the Prohibition era. His infamous nickname came from his weapon of choice, the Thompson machine gun. The litany of crimes committed by Machine Gun Kelly included kidnapping, bootlegging, and armed robbery.
Oklahoma City telephoned National 7117, and that began the wide ramifications of the Urshel kidnap case. The wealthy oil man snatched. From Denver, Colorado was brought Albert Bates, who was tried along with his fellow mobster Harvey Bailey. They are identified by Mrs. Urshel in open court. She is pointing out Bates. The investigation covered 23 states. Before a federal judge, oil man Urshel also identifies Bates, and Bates and Bailey are sentenced for life. Afterward, a plane brings Machine Gun Kelly and his wife Catherine from Memphis, Tennessee. Less than 90 days after the kidnapping, 15 were convicted, 6 get life. Before the judge, Machine Gun Kelly and his woman get theirs. Of the $200,000 in ransom paid, $123,000 was recovered and returned. Bates, Bailey, and Kelly in Alcatraz. When Machine Gun Kelly was captured, he begged, "G-men don't shoot," meaning government men, and the name G-men flashed in the news.
Machine Gun Kelly was one of the 6 notorious criminals dubbed as public enemy number 1 by the FBI and the media. Along with Al Capone, John Dillinger, Pretty Boy Floyd, Babyface Nelson, and Alvin Karpis, the name Machine Gun Kelly has become world famous. As a result of the exposure from Hollywood and the media, in the public consciousness, the widespread legends enshrouding the truth about Machine Gun Kelly have elevated his status. His fame has been elevated to such an extent that for millions around the world, he has become an American folklore hero.
Machine Gun Kelly is a very interesting figure in terms of the whole mythology of the American criminals. There's a large body of evidence that suggests the man was actually very much a coward, and as a result of his extraordinary nickname, he became notorious, more notorious than was actually justified. He ended up in Alcatraz prison. There is no doubt he was a criminal, and he did commit a large number of crimes. However, his reputation is also tinged by this idea that he wasn't the hard-faced, hard-fighting criminal that the others may well have been.
The unlawful exploits of Machine Gun Kelly have been glorified in numerous films, TV shows, and hundreds of books and novels. In 2010, the exploits of Machine Gun Kelly were fictionalised in print by crime novelist Ace Atkins in his book Infamous, which is based on the infamous Urshel kidnapping case, staged by George and Catherine Kelly in July 1933. In the 50s, Machine Gun Kelly and his crimes became a favourite subject of the film noir movement. His exploits are portrayed in films and TV shows from the 50s such as Gangsters, Mal Barker's Killer Brood, Machine Gun Kelly, and The FBI Story. On the silver screen, knuckle-headed gangsters are all too often depicted as intriguing, almost noble characters. However, Mal Barker's Killer Brood bucked the trend by portraying Machine Gun Kelly as a cowardly bully, devoid of any redeeming features.
We see this particularly in the film Ma Barker's Killer Brood, where Machine Gun Kelly is depicted as someone who's very timid, who puts on the persona of a hard man, but in reality is easily led and is actually quite frightened of the people around him. We see this in the scene where he's introduced to a character who he doesn't know is actually the notorious Johnny Dillinger.
All right, bud. Don't muss the fur.
You know, I'm kind of stuck on that fur.
But if I have to work you over, you're going to become mighty unstuck.
Listen, you'd better take it easy, fella. big as you are, you've got a long ways to fall.
Look, friend, nobody puts the rush on Machine Gun Kelly's girl.
Now, Kelly, you want to shoot it out with Johnny Dillinger, you better go outside. Don't you go messing around with my new furniture.
Dillinger?
You heard the name?
Yeah, sure, who hasn't? Say, you know, what I was saying about my baby doll, I mean, a lot of guys make passes at her.
And I bet you don't drop a single one.
Hey, that's a good one, Johnny. Huh, baby?
The film Ma Barker's Killer Brood certainly hammered home the message that Machine Gun Kelly was nothing more than a hollow big mouth.
The nickname came about not because of his use of the machine gun, but the fact that he was presented with a machine gun by his girlfriend.
The nickname Machine Gun Kelly makes him sound like a rough, no-nonsense, tough guy. It's a sobering fact to realize that based on the recollections of those who knew Machine Gun Kelly, the legend is far greater than the reality.
George Machine Gun Kelly was another who made many a front-page headline. Was he also easy to get along with?
Kelly, you know, he had read so much of that propaganda about himself before he was arrested. He got to believe in himself, I think, a little bit. And it would seem like he never tired of telling about all these escapades, you know. And he had lived a rather fascinating life. And the guy, the only thing he was a little inclined to talk about things that he actually hadn't did. For one time he was describing a hell of a sensational thing. I got to think, what the hell is he talking about? I was on this thing, and I don't remember him being around there, you know.
In the film Ma Barker's Killer Brood, we see Machine Gun Kelly being led by his girlfriend. This was something that is a part of his character which the filmmakers sought to play up. It works very well as a dramatic device, but there seems to have been a great deal of truth in the idea that Kelly wasn't the hard man like those that surrounded him. Again, we see the weakness of Kelly, the character, as he is led by his girlfriend to try and outdo the Barker Karpus gang by essentially stealing their kidnap victim.
Kelly! Hello.
Mom? You here all alone?
Sure looks like it, don't it? How did you know where to find us?
We heard some rumors, Ma, and we put two and two together.
Let's cut out the hearts and flowers. Ma, we knew this was your job. We know how you work. All right, boys.
Lou, are you pulling another Jackson boner?
I bubbled that. But this time I've got you outsmarted.
Oh, my, it does look bad, don't it? What's your proposition?
We kind of figured to take Courtney off your hands, Ma.
Are you offering any cash?
Of course we are. Lou figured we'd pay about...
Not one red cent.
But, honey, you said 50 grand.
That was before we found Ma alone.
I never heard of such a thing. Trying to steal another mob's kidnap. Why, it ain't honest.
You're in no spot to refuse, Ma.
Do you want to gamble on that?
Can you beat four of a kind?
Depends on how big they are.
I'd call them aces.
Oh, honey, you've never been known to be very bright. They look more like jokers to me.
You're slipping, Ma. A joker is still an ace.
Not in Texas poker. We strip out the joker, and that's just what I'm going to do with your pack hand. Red!
That's a pretty low card, Ma.
Maybe I better draw another. Carpus!
You better draw your limit, Ma, and fast. I'm losing patience.
Baby face notes. And if Fred and Carpus and Babyface and me ain't enough, then I got a wild card. A real wild card. Johnny Dillinger.
Fives beat fours. I'd say Ma has the best hand.
After this, folks will be calling you Pop Gun Kelly.
Yeah, they sure will, Ma. But like I always said, you're the best in the business.
I'll bet you do, Kelly.
Boys, put up your hardware.
You mean lay down their hardware, don't you?
Well, I guess we can't do business, so we'll be on our way.
Now, is that any way for a guest to act? You're staying to dinner.
The consensus from among those who knew the true Machine Gun Kelly was that he was a rather inept and cowardly windbag who was propelled to unanticipated criminal stardom by his domineering wife, Catherine Kelly. Catherine Kelly was a habitual criminal. She was intent on living a lavish lifestyle and was prepared to use any means to achieve her sole aim in life.
Setting aside the mythology of the silver screen, we know that Machine Gun Kelly actually enrolled in Mississippi State University in order to study agriculture in 1917. However, he abruptly stopped his studies and decided he was going to get a job. But in the 1920s and 1930s, jobs were very hard to come by. It was easier for those with a criminal mindset to make money by breaking the law. Kelly became a minor league bootlegger, colloquially known as a hip flask bootlegger. These low-grade criminals operated at street level, selling small quantities of booze at cheaper prices than the speakeasies. After several run-ins with the local Memphis police, he changed his name from George Kelly Barnes to George R. Kelly in honor of Geneva Ramsey, his girlfriend of the time. They left Memphis and headed west to Tulsa, where George R. Kelly continued to commit smaller crimes and bootlegging. In 1928, he was arrested in Tulsa, Oklahoma, for smuggling liquor onto a Native American reservation. George R. Kelly was sentenced to 3 years in Leavenworth Penitentiary, Kansas, beginning February 11th, 1928. Machine Gun Kelly had no trouble during his incarceration. He was reportedly a model inmate, and as a consequence, he was released early. Shortly after his release, he met and married Catherine Thorne, an experienced
young lady formerly known as Cleo Brooks.
Catherine was already an experienced criminal by the time she met George Kelly. Eventually, Catherine decided she did not have enough money to sustain and buy the lifestyle she craved. She bought Kelly a machine gun and gave him the name Machine Gun Kelly. Bank robbing became their scam. Soon the Kellys appeared quite remarkable. They were known for owning luxury automobiles and expensive jewellery without any visible means of support. Bank robbing was highly dangerous, and they decided to try kidnapping.
Now, you sure she hasn't got anybody to meet her?
Positive. I've been watching her for 2 weeks, haven't I?
She was my kid. I won't let her come walking home from school alone.
She only lives around the block. She doesn't have to cross any streets or anything.
Funny looking little flapper. If I was her old man, I wouldn't pay a dime to get her back.
Smile, George. Be sweet.
Hi.
Hello.
Don't you remember me?
I don't think we've ever met.
Oh, you can just bet we did. You were about, so big then. Hey, you know your dad sent us over to pick you up. Hop in.
I can't. I'm waiting for my nurse.
Nurse?
Yes, here she comes.
How old are you?
9.
Come on, honey. Come on. Daddy's waiting.
We're gonna take your nurse, too. Come on.
I don't understand.
You don't have to. Scream and you die.
As we know, the Barker Karpa's gang turned to kidnapping, and this was soon followed by Machine Gun Kelly. But Machine Gun Kelly does not seem to have been the greatest kidnapper on the planet. His first victim turned out not to have any money. It's the worst thing you can possibly imagine. A kidnapper goes to the length of snatching a victim only to find the victim cannot possibly pay a ransom.
Kelly's first venture into kidnapping occurred in 1930. For his first job, he partnered with a former Illinois police officer turned crook named Bernard Phillips. The kidnapping was a debacle, which cost the lives of an innocent victim when one of the victims taken by Phillips was accidentally killed. When Phillips asked Kelly to join in another kidnapping, he declined.
Well, let's get down to business. You want to plan a kidnap with a man named Jackson.
How did you know that?
Never mind. You ain't got a dime.
Well, he certainly has. He's a millionaire.
His home is mortgaged. His car ain't paid for. He gets $20,000 a year, and his wife's jewels are all in hock.
I don't believe it.
Oh, honey. Just because you had a few dates with him while his wife was out of town.
That's a lie. She was there all the time.
Yeah. Some girlfriend you got, Kelly.
Well, Mud, it was part of casing the job.
I'll plan your job with fatter fish.
In reality, Kelly accurately concluded that the proposed victim did not have enough money to come up with the ransom. Phillips nonetheless went ahead with the abduction, and to his misery discovered that Kelly's assessment had been correct. Phillips was forced to release the kidnapped victim with the pathetic order to bring his own ransom to a meeting. He then borrowed Kelly's Cadillac to collect the ransom. Kelly, who was now being hunted for Phillips's crime, had to load his coupe into a truck and flee with it to Chicago. Although the whole episode had not been a Kelly scheme, the film Ma Barker's Killer Brood pulled no punches in depicting Kelly as a bungling amateur.
This is interesting because the filmmakers can use this device to belittle Kelly. So in the soiree, we have Babyface Nelson explaining to Ma Barker that the first of the major kidnappings engineered by Machine Gun Kelly had gone spectacularly awry.
Machine Gun Kelly should have talked to you before he snatched Jackson.
Oh? What happened?
The guy didn't have a crying dime.
What did you do with the skinny fish?
They had to throw him back.
Following swiftly after Ma Barker's Killer Brood came Roger Corman's movie Machine Gun Kelly, starring a young Charles Bronson.
The head of the gang is George Kelly, sometimes known as Machine Gun.
Charles Bronson as Machine Gun Kelly brings shockingly alive the time of as vicious a killer as you've ever known.
There you are!
The second of the major films that depict Machine Gun Kelly features Charles Bronson. It's a much more sympathetic portrayal of the figure of Machine Gun Kelly, but we still have this idea that in the background here is a man who doesn't have the inner confidence that he's trying to portray to the world.
Oh, you're not being very smart. Because I'm going to kill you now.
You haven't got the guts.
That was Howard and his mob, wasn't there?
Because I made you do it. I made you beg me to understand why you were afraid of dying and things about death. I mothered you till you went out to prove to me you were a man. But everybody knows you're not.
You were always so soft and so easy. I never knew that...
You want a new man now?
Sure. Sure.
I feel sorry for you, George. I never saw anybody look the way you did when she told you about yourself.
Georgie shouldn't do things like that. He's hitting old Harry again. Apple, slap the boy's wrist, huh?
Go ahead, Apple. And I'll peel and core you.
Put the gun away, George.
You must be crazy, Flo. Well, Apple? About time I killed somebody. Go ahead.
Oh, we wouldn't have made a very good team anyway. That's how I like you, baby.
So we have the contradiction between these two films. In the first of the films, he's very much a fall guy, very much someone who's bound to fail. In the second film, he has his wits about him. He's much more a criminal who could have succeeded. In Ma Barker's Killer Brood, he has no chance of success, whereas in the second film, he is potentially someone who could have succeeded with a life of crime.
Machine Gun Kelly was the first lead role for Charles Bronson, who gave a masterful performance as Kelly, portraying him as a deeply flawed and cowardly villain, terrified by the haunting prospect of an early death.
You were scared, weren't you? He'll gun you down, George. You hear me? He's in with a new bunch. You're on the spot. Howard wants to kill you.
Portents of death are a recurring dramatic device, which is repeated several times in the movie.
You still fooling with that thing?
It's a different one. I finished the God of Good Fortune. This is the God of Death. He's an ugly-looking character, isn't he? Oh, hey, look. What's the matter? Is it hot?
You keep your junk away from me.
Won't hurt you, George. Just a symbol. It's like the skull in a bottle of poison or the fires of death.
You know, one of these days, your educated Weisenheimer ways are going to buy you a seat on a hot rock.
Well, at least you're always threatening to, George.
Are you crazy? Not here, not here. Don't shoot. And don't stay mad. George always gets upset about things like that.
American International Pictures released Machine Gun Kelly as a double feature with 1958's The Bonnie Parker Story. In September 1958, Nicholson and Arkoff of AIP said this was their favourite double feature to date. The film received good critical reviews. Roger Corman described it as a major turning point in my career. As it was from this film he began to get serious critical attention. In common with Ma Barker's Killer Brood, this film also stayed true to life, depicting Machine Gun Kelly as his contemporaries inside and outside of prison remembered him.
Harry?
Yeah.
You feel all right?
Okay.
You're a good boy, Harry. You know, you've been real good this time around. You're no longer a hired hand. I'm going to make you a partner. That's right, a full partner. 1/3 of the pie is yours.
Third, huh? With Fandango, that makes 4 of us.
Well, Fanny won't be playing fair. At least I don't think he will. They'll be picking up the money pretty soon. Why don't you take the car? Get down and meet him after he gets it, see? But don't walk right up to him. Follow him a little. And if he doesn't head straight for the meeting place, you bring him in.
The unanimous opinion was felt that Machine Gun Kelly was nothing more than a boastful, low-life coward.
Both asleep.
That's good.
You worried about him?
This 1958 film noir deserves credit as it does not attempt to take the easy route and romanticise the figure of Machine Gun Kelly, or try to make him likeable for a cinema audience. In fact, to Mr. Corman's credit, he does precisely the opposite. Kelly is relentlessly broody, haunted by the terrifying spectre of an early grave. In this way, Roger Corman throws both light and shade on the character, which brings this criminal to life by illustrating the many flaws in the makeup of Machine Gun Kelly. However, there is no way around the fact that having an accomplished, articulate actor like Charles Bronson play Kelly does nonetheless add an extra layer of glamour to the Machine Gun Kelly legend.
His reputation is in tatters by the end of Ma Barker's Killer Brood. It's not in fantastic standing in the Charles Bronson film, but we nonetheless see a character who has some prospect of success. In order to make these films watchable and engaging, you do of course have the very best Hollywood screenwriters, the very best directors, producers, art directors, and they are making a commercial product. So they need to depict Machine Gun Kelly as an interesting character, as a worthwhile character in the second film. And that casts a false air about these people who were scum, who had no place in our society, who would think nothing of taking you or I's life. They are the worst kind of individuals. But once they're up there on the silver screen, they take on an allure that they didn't deserve. But this had to be done by the filmmakers, because no one is going to go and see a film about Machine Gun Kelly, because you can tell his story in 5 minutes. He's evil, he's a crook, he's a menace to society. There's nothing more to say. That is done. So what the filmmaker has to do is to take us on a journey with Machine Gun Kelly. So we end up with the most glamorous possible girlfriend. We end up with the feeling that maybe this guy wasn't so bad after all, because the filmmakers have to make him a believable character, and a character for whom we have at least some sympathy.
You figure $250,000 will beat it?
It might if it comes off. Who set it up?
We did.
You're kidding. After that Jackson goof, you couldn't cop a bag of marbles at a dime store.
We tried to get Ma Barker to mastermind the job, but she wants 50 G's.
It's worth it.
In advance? I've got a better idea. I'll get Doc Barker.
Yeah? And he's just as smart as Ma.
And a lot cheaper.
But the G heat's on him. You can't get him.
I'll get him.
Yeah. Maybe you will at that.
Honey. Will you help us?
Honey, I'm still hot from that Courtney job.
Oh, think of the fun we could have.
Are you kidding? You know Kelly would never go for this arrangement. And Ma, she would skin me alive.
Hook me. Honey, it's so hot.
In Ma Barker's Killer Brood, we do have the episode where Doc Barker, of course, takes the girlfriend of Machine Gun Kelly and takes her to the hotel just before he's arrested by the FBI. This is another device by the filmmakers to belittle Machine Gun Kelly. He's incredibly protective of his girlfriend. She's running around. She's looking for a better class of criminal.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation is as close to you as your nearest telephone. It seeks to be your protector in all matters within its jurisdiction. It belongs to you.
Kelly's criminal career as a kidnapper was marked by further failure. According to Persons in Hiding, a book by FBI Director Edgar Hoover, Kelly worked with Catherine Kelly and Eddie Dole in the 1932 abduction of Arthur Wolverton. The kidnapping took place in South Bend, Indiana on the 26th of January 1932 for a $50,000 ransom, which is equivalent to about $2.5 million in today's value. Mrs. Wolverton was given a ransom note and told to drive her husband's car back to South Bend to collect the money. She immediately reported the kidnapping to the police, and by the next morning the press were notified. The story received front page coverage in newspapers across the region, published on January the 27th, 1932, including evening editions of the South Bend Tribune, the South Bend News-Times, and the Chicago Tribune. Hundreds of papers throughout the United States, including the New York Times, ran wire reports of the crime. Despite the fact that no ransom was paid, there was a huge outcry in the press, and Howard Wolverton was released unharmed after less than 24 hours in captivity. According to Edward Wolverton's federal statement, he was released on the promise that he would pay $8,000 following whatever instructions they provided in a subsequent letter.
However, the Kellys were never charged with Wolverton's kidnapping. Despite the absence of an investigation or much information about the Wolverton kidnapping, in early 1932, the crime revived discussion for a federal kidnapping act in Congress. The act, which made the transporting of kidnapping victims over state lines a federal crime, which was punishable by the death penalty. The law, passed in 1932, is typically known as the Limburg Law, in reference to the untimely death of the 2-year-old kidnap victim, Charles Augustus Limburg Jr.
With the potential of the death penalty, the wave of kidnappings receded. However, the Kellys were undaunted. They wanted more. Despite the danger of finding themselves in the electric chair, together they planned their most audacious scheme: the July 1933 abduction and ransoming of Charles F. Urschel.
The story now picks up the trail of the Kellys on July 22nd at the Stratford, Oklahoma farm of her grandparents, accompanied by Albert Bates. At the noonday meal, Kelly remarked, "There's more than likely to be a kidnapping in Oklahoma City tonight." And sure enough, Kelly was right. That night, from his home in the exclusive residential district, Charles F. Urschel, millionaire oil man of Oklahoma City, was abducted. Through this door, leading to the sun porch, where the Urschels and two friends were playing a final rubber of bridge, entered two sinister figures. Don't move. Don't move or we'll blow your heads off. We want Urschel. Which one is Urschel? Which one is Urschel? Well then, we'll take them both. Don't say a word or go near that telephone or we'll blow your heads off. About an hour after identifying themselves, Urschel's friend was released on a lonely road with instructions to keep his mouth shut if he wanted to help Urschel. They then blindfolded Urschel. He was told not to hear or see anything on the trip or they would kill him. About 2 hours after leaving Oklahoma City, the kidnappers arrived at this farm, where Urschel was transferred to a larger car. After Grandma Coleman demanded, "Get that kidnapped man off my farm," they departed, followed by Catherine Kelly to clear the way at the Shannon farm near Paradise, Texas. The main street of the little town of Paradise, Texas, near where R.G. Shannon, known as Boss, on account of his political activities, had lived for more than 30 years. The trail to the Shannon farm was blazed as shown by these painted posts. The afternoon of July 23rd, the kidnappers arrived at the Shannon farm. Urschel was kept in this garage until after dark. Here you see the farm home of Armand Shannon, son of R.G. Shannon, to which Urschel was transferred Monday night. What a lonely, secluded spot this is, but the kidnappers did not reckon with the intelligence of their victim and the thoroughness of the United States Bureau of Investigation. They placed their victim in the small room at the right, where he was held captive in the manner shown. He noted the regular daily passage of an airplane. He noted that it rained on a certain day. He heard the name of the rural postman. These clues were followed up later by federal agents with the result that mail plane schedules indicated Paradise, Texas, which was further verified by rainfall records. And here they also learned that Armand Shannon's nickname was Potatoes. One of the clever things which Urschel did and which later aided in the conviction of the kidnappers was to leave his fingerprints wherever possible. Urschel was allowed to write his first communication in which he said, "My personal funds are very low, and if the estate funds have to be touched to pay the ransom, just forget about it. Let it go. It will be all right with me." But after reading the note, the kidnappers said, "No, that won't do. We'll tell you what we want you to write. Now write this. Dear John, you undoubtedly know about my predicament. If Arthur has returned, please deliver the enclosed letter to him, otherwise to Kirkpatrick. Deliver in person and do not communicate by telephone. Tell no one else about this letter, not even your wife. When you deliver it, do not go to residence. Authorities must be kept off the case or release impossible, and they cannot effect rescue. For my sake, follow these instructions to the letter and do not discuss with anyone other than those mentioned. This is my final letter to any of my friends or family, and if this contact is not successful, I fear for my life. When in Oklahoma City, keep out of sight as much as possible. I am putting all my dependence in you regarding this matter, and feel sure you will take every precaution possible. Best regards, as ever, your friend, now sign it, C.F. Urschel." In another letter, the kidnappers instructed Kirkpatrick to insert this ad in a newspaper to signify his willingness to comply with their demands. Kirkpatrick, who delivered the $200,000 ransom July 30th in Kansas City to a man later identified as Kelly. Urschel was released at this spot near Norman, Oklahoma. Walking to this barbecue stand, he called a cab to take him home. This list of the serial numbers of the 10,000 $20 bills delivered as ransom furnished the clues which led to the arrest of the first suspect, 3 men in St. Paul, Minnesota on August 8th. Following clues obtained from the close observations of Urschel, a small army of special agents and peace officers swooped down at daybreak on August 12th on the home of R.G. Boss Shannon near Paradise, Texas, the remote and secluded hideout of the kidnappers. The net closed in on Catherine Kelly's mother, Mrs. Ora Shannon, her husband, Boss Shannon, his son, Armand, and the notorious Harvey Bailey, who was captured while sleeping on a cot in the yard. Bailey was armed with a young arsenal, and on his person, agents found $700 of the Urschel ransom money. Bailey and the Shannons were placed in the Dallas County Jail. At this prison, the Kansas State Penitentiary, Bailey and 10 other convicts staged a sensational escape on Memorial Day. Here is the spot where Bailey and his comrades went over the wall in their dash for freedom. Bailey chose another holiday, Labor Day, to make a daring escape from the death cell in the Dallas County Jail. With the aid of a jailer and an outsider, Bailey secured saw blades and a pistol. Selecting a time when everything was favorable, he succeeded in gaining his freedom. Taking the jailer with him and forcing him to secure his car from a nearby garage, he started his mad dash. He eluded officers until he reached Ardmore, Oklahoma. There's Bailey now, getting gas. He sees the officers at the same time they spot him. Around he swings and heads in the opposite direction, with a good lead over the officers who were going 7 miles an hour. Back they come, and a thrilling chase through the busy streets of Ardmore has begun. Just 4 hours after one of the most daring breaks in the history of the Dallas County Jail, Harvey Bailey's mad flight came to a dramatic end. Crashing a wheel on a sharp turn, he was taken into custody by Ardmore officers without a struggle. Oklahoma officers effected the capture of the notorious criminal. Again in the custody of the law, Harvey J. Bailey, America's #1 bad boy. In the meantime, at this rooming house in Denver, detectives and federal agents captured Albert Bates, identified by the Urschels as one of the abductors. The testimony showed that Bates lived at these apartment houses under the names of George L. Davis and Leo Feldman, and from here he communicated with Kelly. George and Catherine Kelly, in their wild dash from state to state, city to city, paused long enough in Chicago to pen a couple of letters. This letter, threatening murderous death to Urschel and his family if the Shannons were convicted, was signed with Kelly's fingerprint. Here's the home of J.R. Tishner in Memphis, Tennessee, where Machine Gun Kelly and his wife were captured by a heavily armed squadron of police and federal agents. Detective Sergeant William Rainey, who risked a barrage of machine gun bullets when he knocked on the door of Kelly and captured the most wanted man in America. And here they are, George and Catherine, at the showdown, an unbeatable pair, until they were called by the aces of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Following close on the heels of the capture of the Kellys in Memphis, federal and local officers acting upon a tip made a midnight visit, September 26th, to the farm of Cass Coleman. Visited by Cass Coleman, agents proceeded to this old well in the middle of a cotton patch, where they recovered $73,250 of the Urschel ransom money. Kelly and Coleman had buried a few days previous. It took them an hour to count it. The money was too hot for Kelly to handle. I wonder how he expected it to cool off in a thermos jug.
The hiding place of the victim was the farm of Catherine's mother. In return for the safe return of Charles F. Urschel, George and Catherine planned to demand a ransom of $200,000, the equivalent in today's money of $4.5 million, a staggering amount for a staggering crime.
Here comes Charles F. Urschel, the victim of the world's most astounding kidnap plot. He takes a seat beside his wife. His extreme courage in the face of threats of death is America's challenge to gangland. The trial is over, and the jury has reached a verdict. Thus, Uncle Sam rolled up his sleeves and dealt gangland a swift, decisive blow. Judge Edgar F. Boss.
The defendants, Albert L. Bates, Harvey J. Bailey, R.G. Shannon, Ora L. Shannon, Armin Crawford Shannon, Edward Berman, and Clifford Kelly will please stand. Now, in this case, the jury has returned the verdict of guilty. The court is of the opinion that this verdict is fully sustained by the evidence. Therefore, the judgment of this court that Albert L. Bates be sentenced to the federal penitentiary for the term of his natural life. It's the judgment of this court that Harvey J. Bailey be sentenced to the federal penitentiary for the term of his natural life. It's the judgment of this court that R.G. Shannon be sentenced to the federal penitentiary for the term of his natural life. Judgment of this court that Ora L. Shannon be sentenced to the federal penitentiary for the term of her natural life. It's the judgment of this court that Armand Shannon be sentenced to the federal penitentiary for a period of 10 years. But that sentence will be suspended.
Even in the face of almost certain conviction, Kelly maintained his air of braggadocio and nonchalance. This was considerably disturbed, however, by a severe pistol whipping which he received at the hands of one of the federal guards. After starting something he couldn't finish, he was warned that at any further show of violence he would be shot. This warning evidently had the desired effect, because George was very respectful of the federal officers for the balance of the trial. Look at the knot on his head. He has another one on the back, and his yellow-dyed hair was streaked with his own blood as he appeared in court, a wiser and a more subdued man.
The judgment of the court that George R. Kelly be sentenced to the federal penitentiary for the term of his natural life.
Now we introduce the nation's youngest United States District Attorney, Herbert K. Hyde.
I have been requested to say a few words in connection with the Herschel kidnap trial held here in Oklahoma City. 76 days ago, Charles F. Herschel, one of our prominent citizens of Oklahoma City, was abducted and kidnapped from his home. Today, 7 people were sentenced to the penitentiary for the commission of this crime. This should serve as a notice to those who would violate and set aside our federal laws that no individual or group of individuals is more powerful than the federal government.
Now it's all over. These people who became famous, or rather infamous, overnight will soon be forgotten by the world and will spend the rest of their lives within the grim gray walls of prison. Sirens scream and an armored car. They are going for ride, and with the federal government at the wheel.
On October 12, 1933, George and Catherine Kelly were convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Machine Gun Kelly spent his remaining 21 years in prison. During his time in Alcatraz, he got the nickname Pop Gun Kelly.
He did end up in Alcatraz prison. There is no question that he was a criminal. There's no question that he needed to be kept away from society. The extent to which you could describe him as a criminal mastermind is hugely questionable.
According to fellow inmate Dale Stamphill, the nickname originated because he told big fish stories. The cons called him Pop Gun Kelly after cork guns that were popular with kids. The guys didn't take him seriously. This may have been stemmed from the fact that, in addition to his exaggerated tall tales, Kelly was a model prisoner. He certainly did not act like the brutal gangster that his wife, the media, and FBI had made him out to be. The reality was that he was like he had been portrayed in the movies, a boastful coward who was quickly unmasked.
Machine Gun Kelly spent 17 years on Alcatraz as inmate number 117, working in prison industries and continuing to boast about his past escapades to his inmates. In 1951, George Machine Gun Kelly was considered a low-risk prisoner and transferred quietly back to Leavenworth. He died of a heart attack at Leavenworth on July 18, 1954, the day after his 54th birthday. He was buried at Cottondale, Texas Cemetery in Catherine's stepfather's family plot with a small headstone marked George B. Kelly, 1954. Catherine Kelly was released from prison in 1958. She lived in relative anonymity in Oklahoma under an assumed name of Lyra Cleo Kelly until her death in 1985 at the age of 81.